So I'm being asked this question a lot more times than I'd like to, so I'm just going to put this out here so I can just direct people to this video. These are my top 10 albums. It is important to note that none of these are in a particular order, they're just the order that I thought of them in. Number 1 is Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. Putting Kind of Blue in here seems like a bit of a cliche or a cop-out, but it's really a beautiful album. There are no wrong notes in this entire record. Miles Davis is perfect, Coltrane is perfect, Bill Evans is amazing, Paul Chambers is on form the whole time. This is one of the most perfect records ever recorded. There are no wrong notes. It's also a really beautiful concept. It gets into the whole Lydian chromatic concept, which is something I'm going to talk about in a later video. But it's really just fascinating how all these musicians came together and really made something beautiful over really simple pieces of music. Number 2 is Green Day's American Idiot. They're just some albums that get to you when they come out. You know, when you're 13, they're your favorite album and never really stops being your favorite album. And American Idiot is that album for me. When I listened to it the first time, every single song sounded like it was about me, and that's never changed. And that's really what makes a good rock album a good rock album. Plus, like the first band I was ever in, we played one song, and it was American Idiot. I've never really left this album behind. It's always been with me, and it's always been a great sort of motivator and it's a storyline for my life. It's also really fascinating the way Billie Joe weaves the story together lyrically, and it really fits very well. It makes a very good rock opera. Number 3 is Pat Metheny's Bright Size Life. Bright Size Life is an album that really sort of changed the way that music worked. It took the simple AABA form that a lot of jazz pieces have, where you have your head and your B section, then you play the beginning of the head again, then you just go into solos from the whole group. It took that and really changed what you could do with that. You added long flowing introductions with a lot of layers and a lot of overdubs from the guitar, and it made the bass a lot more active because, it has Jaco Pastorius on bass, and it's really an amazing record. Plus, Metheny is just a great guitar player. He has so many great licks and borrows so much from rock and roll and fusion, brings all this into the jazz that he makes, and it's really a great album for that. You could say that this album is in here because it's the sort of music that I want to make, and Pat Metheny is the sort of guitarist that I aspire to and the sort of style that I really want to play eventually. Number 4 is the Beatles' Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul is on this list because it's sort of the music that I started out wanting to make. There's pieces on here like Norwegian Wood, like I'm Looking Through You, like In My Life, that are really amazing pieces of music, especially coming from a rock band, even though the Beatles are much more than a rock band. And it's the music that I wanted to make and still have at the back of my mind. And the Beatles are also sort of how I learned to play guitar. You start off playing, they're simple early blues songs, then sort of as you get further into the catalog and get later into their work, it gets much more complicated and they have a lot more going on, and it's a great way to sort of look at the instrument of the guitar and how a band can evolve and change over time. Number 5 is Bill Evans and Jim Hall's Undercurrent. This is the first duet work from two great musicians, Jim Hall, who's a fantastic guitarist, and Bill Evans, who's one of my favorite pianists, and it's really amazing to see how these two work together and these instruments blend so well, and how you can really get lost and not really tell who's doing what and where it all is coming from. Jim really forms such great melodies over Bill's fantastic comping and his fills, and vice versa, that it creates one of the best atmospheres I've ever heard on an album. This is my go-to, just have on in the background album. It's always sort of been there for me, and I really love it. Number 6 is Bill Evans, The Bill Evans Album. Bill Evans is one of the people that's going to make multiple appearances in these lists because his piano work and the way he moves through the tones and the way his left hand is always where it should be is something that I try to think about when I'm playing guitar. This is a great album from Bill and his trio. He has a lot of tunes come off this album, like Waltz for Debbie and Response Person I Know, and a tune that I love called 12-Tone Tune, which really took Schoenberg's 12-tone serialism that I explained and applied it to a jazz setting, and I'm going to be putting a video of that on this channel soon. But this album is another great group work. The trio he's with that had Eddie Gomez on bass really fits so well together, and he does a fantastic job in these small group settings. And moreover, his melodic work on this album is some of the best I've ever heard from piano. He really just makes the instrument his own. Number 7 is Joe Pass's Virtuoso Number 1. Besides having one of history's just best mustaches, Joe Pass is really a fantastic guitar player. He moves so quickly and he really fits the chords so well, even when he's putting a bunch of alterations. He uses a lot of fully altered dominant chords a lot, and he moves through this music so quickly and so just evocatively that it's really fantastic. For me, Joe Pass represents what was possible in the old school of jazz. He was the best guitar player that could have possibly been before rock and funk and all of these other styles started to have a huge influence on jazz. He's really what jazz stopped at before sort of Pat Metheny and that generation took over. Pass and Metheny are really my top 2 guitarists because they're sort of the representations of the best of the old and the best of the new in jazz. Number 8 is Last Train Home's Bound Away. Unlike a lot of the rest of these albums, which had a huge influence on my playing and the way I think about music, this album is sort of my favorite to listen to. The lyrics are poignant, the band's always in the right place, and it really has the great feel of a good album. But it's, again, not something that's really had an influence on how I play guitar, except for the piece at the end, Bound Away, which is an instrumental piece, is a piece that I've covered on my show, and I love the simple melody of it. Number 9 is John Coltrane's Giant Steps. This album's always been a goal for a lot of jazz musicians. If you can play the pieces on this album, if you can understand the pieces on this album, you've accomplished something. You've done something that is commendable. But at the same time, this is not an album to just get caught up in because it's very complicated, and for a lot of people, it's not what they want to do with music. It's a very cool system of looking at music with a very interesting way of fitting changes over more simplified progressions. I'm actually going to talk about Coltrane changes, which sort of showed up first on this album in a later video, but this is sort of just a goal album for a lot of people, and it's also just great to listen to and great to see how Coltrane takes really simple licks and throws them into this very, very complex system that he's created for himself. Number 10 is John Coltrane's My Favorite Things. This is my favorite Coltrane album to listen to. He still has some of the structure that he had on Giant Steps and still uses some of his system that I'll talk about later, but he's gotten a lot freer. He can move a lot further outside of that system than he has been able to do in a lot of his other albums, and it's also one of the best performances by McCoy Tyner, a pianist who would play with him for a number of years, and McCoy Tyner is another person who I listen to a lot to work on my comping and just sort of how to fit in the background of a group, and it's really a great record for that. And an honorable mention goes to the Ramones' Rocket to Russia. Even though I don't listen to a lot of this music anymore, I've sort of moved away from the punk setting. Rocket to Russia is really what got me wanting to play in a band and play guitar and play all these things. Because, I mean, it's a great album. It's driving. There's a lot of awesome rock and roll in it, but it's still, you know, catchy and fun to listen to. I mean, I think I was listening to it when I was like 8. And it's really a great album to get kids and get everyone you know interested in playing music and making something they love. That's all. I'll be talking about Coltrane changes in my next video, so I'll see you guys later.